Welcome back. You know, have you ever noticed you're the only one reaching for a cardigan while everyone else seems perfectly fine in short sleeves? Today, we're really looking under the skin to see why the world starts to feel just a little bit chillier as the years go by.
It's so true. And it's such a universal experience, isn't it? You walk into a room that used to feel pleasant, but now there's a draft only you can feel. What's so fascinating is that it's not just getting older in a vague sense. There's actually this incredibly complex biological symphony that's just beginning to quiet down inside ourselves.
You know, to really understand why we feel that chill more often as we get older, we have to look at the inner furnace. Our bodies are constantly working to maintain that 98.6-degree baseline. But what's so interesting is that that target actually starts to dip slightly as we age.
That's exactly it. And it really comes down to the hypothalamus. Think of it as the brain's master thermostat. In our younger years, it's just incredibly sharp, making these split-second adjustments to our blood flow. But as we age, that control center becomes a bit more relaxed. It's a little slower to react. So when you step into a cool room, your body just doesn't ramp up the heat production quite as fast as it once did.
I want to focus on our skin for a moment. Our primary shield, really. We often forget it's this incredibly complex insulator, not just a covering. But as we get older, that structure, it starts to shift in some pretty significant ways.
Exactly. And it's such a natural process, but when the dermis and epidermis begin to thin, it changes everything. Those blood vessels end up so much closer to the surface, so we're losing heat to the air way faster than we used to. I always think of it like this. It's as if you've spent your whole life in a heavy, cozy winter coat, but then you slowly swap it for a light windbreaker. You're still protected, but that deep insulation just isn't there anymore.
You know, we spend so much time worrying about it, but beneath the surface, there's this layer we actually desperately need, subcutaneous fat.
That's exactly it. Think of it like that pink fiberglass insulation you see in the walls of a house. Its whole job is to trap heat. But as we get older, that layer starts to thin out, particularly in our arms and legs.
Right. And it's so interesting how our body composition shifts like that. It's almost ironic, isn't it?
It really is. We might gain weight in our midsection, which keeps the core warm, but our extremities are essentially losing their protective padding. It's a huge reason why your arms might feel a draft, even if your belly feels perfectly fine.
So we really have to look at the engine room here, our muscles. It's so interesting because they aren't just there to move us around. They're actually our primary heat generators.
That's exactly it. Even when you're totally at rest, your muscle tissue is radiating warmth. And this is where it gets tough. After age 30, we start losing that mass through sarcopenia. It's like our internal furnace is physically getting smaller. So when you're cold and you start shivering, which is really just those muscles microspasming to create heat, it's just not as effective as it used to be. It's a bit of a slow fade of that internal firepower we had in our 20s.
That's exactly it. And it really centers on our basal metabolic rate, the BMR. It's basically the energy your body needs just to keep the lights on, and heat is the natural byproduct of that process.
It's so interesting how that shifts, right? As our BMR slows down, partly because of that muscle loss we touched on, we're actually producing fewer BTUs of heat every hour. It's like we're becoming these highly fuel-efficient vehicles as we age, which sounds like a win, but the trade-off of that efficiency is that we just run a lot cooler. We're not generating that same internal warmth anymore.
If we zoom in even closer, right down into the cells, we find these tiny power plants called mitochondria. They're basically what keeps the engine running, right?
That's exactly it. And it's so interesting how that internal machinery shifts as we get older. These mitochondria are responsible for turning nutrients into ATP, our cellular energy. But over time, they become fewer in number and just less efficient.
So it's not just about having less energy to move. It's actually about the physical warmth we generate.
Right. because heat is the natural byproduct of that energy production. When that process slows down, we experience this quiet, systemic cooling. It's happening in every tissue of the body, literally producing less thermal energy at a molecular level. It's cooling from the inside out.
So let's talk about the plumbing. Specifically, how our circulation shifts over time.
It's really quite fascinating. The body is just incredibly smart. It always prioritizes survival above everything else.
That's exactly it. So as we age, the body gets even more protective of the vitals, the heart, lungs, and brain, at the expense of the extremities.
Right. It's this deep-seated survival mechanism. It essentially says, I can afford cold fingers, but I can't afford a cold liver. So the warm blood stays tucked away in the torso, leaving your hands and feet to fend for themselves. It's why you'll feel that chill in your toes, even if your core temperature is perfectly fine.
It's so interesting how our circulation shifts as we age. I mean, when we're younger, our blood vessels are almost springy, right? They're incredibly snappy, widening and narrowing the second we need to manage our body heat.
That's exactly it. In the lab, we call that vascular reactivity. But over time, those vessels naturally start to stiffen. It's a bit like an old rubber hose that's lost its flex. So even when your brain is signaling, hey, we need warmth in the hands, the vessels are just slower to respond. It basically acts like a dam. The warmth stays locked in your core, leaving your skin feeling that chill.
You know, it's funny how we often joke about socks being the ultimate practical gift, but as we get older, they really do become the most essential item in the wardrobe, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. And it's such a fascinating bit of biology. When you think about it, the distance from the heart all the way down to the toes is the longest journey our blood has to make. It's quite a trek.
Right. And when you combine that distance with a heart that pumps a little slower and piping that's gotten a bit stiffer over the years, the blood has cooled down significantly by the time it reaches the feet. You really start to notice it at night.
That's exactly it. And it's so interesting how our circulation shifts there, because cold feet can actually keep you from falling asleep. Your body needs to release heat through its extremities to lower your core temperature for rest. But if those vessels are clamped shut because they're too cold, that heat stays trapped. It's like a biological bottleneck that can really disrupt your whole night.
You know, we really have to look at hormones here, specifically the thyroid. It's such a vital piece of the puzzle, acting as that master regulator for our entire metabolism, isn't it?
That's exactly it. And it's so common for thyroid function to just drift as we get older, often toward that underactive side. Even those subclinical shifts, where you're still technically in the normal range but on the lower end, can noticeably drop your body temperature. It's like the thyroid is whispering to your cells instead of shouting. The internal fires just burn a bit lower. It's usually the very first thing a doctor will check if you find yourself perpetually freezing.
You know, there's actually a really fascinating twist here. It turns out sometimes you aren't actually physically colder, but you feel colder.
That's exactly it. It's almost like a faulty sensor on a car dashboard. The engine itself is running perfectly fine, but that little warning light just keeps blinking.
Right. So the nerve receptors in our skin are basically sending a cold alert to the brain, even when the room is a comfortable 72 degrees. It's like the signal is getting crossed as we age.
Precisely. And it's so important to remember that this perception is 100% real to the person feeling it. Even if the thermometer says one thing, their body is telling them something completely different.
You know, one factor that's so often overlooked in this conversation is just water. It's remarkable how well it holds heat. It essentially acts as this vital thermal buffer for the entire body.
That's exactly it. And it's tough because as we age, those internal thirst signals tend to blunt. We often end up moving through the day chronically, even if just mildly dehydrated.
Right, and when we have less total body water, we're essentially losing that thermal mass that keeps us steady.
Exactly. It's like a large pot of water on the stove versus a tiny cup. That cup is going to lose its heat so much faster. So staying hydrated is really a thermal strategy, not just a hydration one. It keeps your blood volume up, which is what allows your circulation to actually keep you warm.
You know, we also have to look at what's actually in the medicine cabinet.
That's a great point. It's so interesting how many common medications we take later in life have these cooling side effects.
Right. Beta blockers are the classic example. They're amazing for blood pressure because they reduce the heart's workload. But that also means there's a bit less force pushing blood all the way to your hands and feet.
That's exactly it. And even blood thinners can shift how we perceive temperature. It really is this delicate trade-off. We're protecting the heart, but the price might be colder fingers. It's always worth a chat with your doctor, though, if that chill starts to feel unbearable.
Let's talk about the fuel side of things for a moment. It's so interesting how something as simple as low iron, anemia, can be the real culprit behind that deep, persistent chill.
That's exactly it. You have to think of iron as the key that lets your red blood cells carry oxygen. Without that oxygen, your internal metabolic fires just can't burn hot. And it's not just iron. B12 deficiency is another big one we see, especially as gut health shifts with age. If you aren't absorbing those nutrients, you essentially lack the raw materials to generate heat.
Right, which makes the idea of warming foods feel a lot less like a myth and more like biology.
Exactly. When you eat things like root vegetables or protein, your body actually has to work harder to break them down. It creates this beautiful little internal heat wave called the thermic effect of food. You're quite literally stoking the fire from the inside out.
So, knowing what we're up against, what's the first step? What can we actually do to stay warm?
Honestly, the most effective defense is just movement. And it's so interesting how our circulation shifts the moment we start.
Right. And we aren't talking about training for a marathon here, are we? Just small, intentional shifts?
Exactly. Even just getting up every hour to walk around the room, that simple act forces your muscles to contract. And that contraction is key. It literally generates heat and coaxes those stiff blood vessels to dilate.
I love that. It's like you're manually cranking up the thermostat, since the metabolism isn't doing it automatically anymore.
That's exactly it. And if you can add in some gentle resistance training, you're preserving that precious muscle mass we talked about. You're essentially building a better engine to keep yourself warm from the inside out.
You know, it's so interesting how our relationship with the cold changes as we age. We often think of it as just putting on more clothes, but there's really an art to insulation, isn't there? It's less about the stuff and more about how we actually trap air.
That's exactly it. You're essentially trying to create these little microclimates right against your skin. And that's where the material choice becomes so vital. Natural fibers like wool or cashmere are just superior because they trap those air pockets while wicking moisture away. See, if you're in cotton and you sweat even a tiny bit, that fabric stays wet and you'll just freeze. But wool, it keeps you warm even when it's damp. It's that flexibility that helps us manage those daily fluctuations and how our bodies regulate temperature. You know, I think it's also about how we can subtly engineer our immediate environment. Heated throws, for instance, are a total game changer. They apply warmth directly to the body, rather than forcing your system to wait for the entire room to heat up. It's much more efficient.
That's exactly it. And there's also the humidity factor, which is so often overlooked. Dry winter air actually evaporates moisture off your skin faster, which physically cools you down. If you use a humidifier, 68 degrees can suddenly feel more like 72. It's this clever little physics trick, keeping your skin and mucous membranes hydrated so you actually hold on to your own heat. It's a small shift, but the difference in how you feel is just night and day.
And you know, there's this really fascinating psychological layer to all of this. It's not just about the thermostat. Feeling cold can actually be deeply tied to feelings of isolation or even loneliness.
That's exactly it. It's wild, but studies have actually shown that when people feel socially excluded, they literally perceive the room temperature as being lower. But on the flip side, just holding a warm cup of tea can make us feel more generous and connected. It's why that Danish concept of hygge, the soft lighting and cozy textures, is so powerful. It signals safety to the brain, and once the brain feels safe, it relaxes that stress response, which can actually help improve your peripheral circulation.
It's so interesting how aging really shifts our relationship with our own bodies, isn't it? That sudden chill we feel, it's almost like a signal, a nudge to finally slow down and find some warmth, both physically and emotionally.
That's exactly it. It's this gentle reminder that we just need a little more nurturing than we used to. And honestly, that is perfectly okay. Whether it's a cashmere scarf or just a hot cup of tea, it's about really listening to what your internal thermostat is asking for.
Right. It's about that self-attunement. We'd love to hear from you on this. What's your favorite way to stay cozy lately? And have you noticed a shift in how your body handles the cold? Let us know in the comments.